What up, Ho Biscuits? It's your girl Skitten, back at it again. First and foremost, I hope you guys are doing well. I hope you guys are staying safe and sanitized. I went shopping earlier today. I had to pick up some some new shirts, a couple pants, whatever. And I'm sorry, I normally keep my intros pretty universal, gender neutral, but I would just like to talk to the women folk, femme folk, whoever likes to wear women's clothing, actually, like the gendered clothing, right? Why is everything a freaking crop top or a bodysuit? Why can I not find just a regular blouse that doesn't just look like I'm wearing a pillowcase? I'm walking around and I kept seeing shirts like, oh, that's cute. Why is it only 6 inches? Okay. And I already have a pretty difficult time finding shirts that fit because I have a pretty long torso, which first of all means that bodysuits are out of the question because they never make them long enough for me. But also it just means that that crop top that is super cute on another girl and it's just above her belly button. No, it sits right here on me. My entire, everything is out directly underneath my bust line. And that's just not always the look I'm going for. You feel me? I feel like y'all feel me. I feel like y'all feel me out there. We need to start a revolution. We need to start boycotting these companies because it is so frustrating that I cannot just find a cute blouse, a cute shirt or whatever without it being literally half the size that I need it to be. I'm tired. I'm tired. Anywho's, today we are here for some overly sarcastic productions. This is a history one. It's called The Dark Ages Were Fine, actually. It's a history hijinks. So you know it's gonna feature my boy Blue. So I am pretty excited about it. Without further ado, let's go ahead and get started.
Popular conceptions of world history can be rightly accused of following something of a formula, and among slavish gossip circles about the sex lives of famous monarchs is an insistence that the medieval period is either dumb and boring or solely interesting by virtue of how abysmal it was. Thus follows the utter grimefest of the fantasy genre. But I can't quite blame popular media for working off a shared set of assumptions that in turn endlessly perpetuate themselves, nor is it fair to call this a recent trend, as Petrarch called post-Roman history the Dark Ages in the 1330s, and Giorgio Vasari first coined the term Rinascita in 1550. So by their hot takes combined, this concept of Rome good, 15th century Italy good, everything else trash seemed to stick, leaving the insultingly titled Dark Ages as the elevator music between the long-dead glories of the classical world and the hot new Renaissance. And at that point, why hold back? Just call it the Dark Ages to show us how you really feel. No. And far be it from me to lecture anyone for liking the classics, but the character assassination of medieval history goes too far when its most defining traits are darkness, murder, sex, and religious corruption. Sometimes in that order. And I'd be willing to bet that, at least in the English-speaking world, this common image results from our suspiciously narrow focus on a very small slice of geography. Namely, whatever is in a 500-mile radius of London. That nets us the Isles, France, Germany, and the gentle implication of Scandinavia. This shouldn't be too surprising. We tend to know our own histories best, but it's a little odd that this tunnel vision only applies from 500 to 1500 AD. And that has some pretty goofy consequences, like people rightly praising the unique setting and folkloric inspirations behind The Witcher when that's just fantasy Poland. My guys, Poland is great, but if Poland counts for exotic, then we need to reevaluate some stuff. Okay, but what am I on about here? Essentially, what we ignore and what we choose to glamorize in the medieval period are a disservice to history and to ourselves. Now, there's a lot of ground to cover and a lot I'm sadly going to skip, but in attempting to take a far-reaching and diverse survey of the Middle Ages in order to show how they really weren't that dark at all, let's do some history. First off, the most glaring counterpoint to the myth of medieval squalor is China. For 8 centuries out of the millennium, it operated a unified imperial dynasty, which was a new record for stability and peace. And while the state was prosperous and the cities were dazzlingly ornate, the real accomplishment was in their cultural advances. During the Tang Dynasty, China's 3 main religions of Taoism, Confucianism, and Buddhism began to enmesh within each other, resulting not just in developments like the Taoism-inspired Zen Buddhism, but combining into a complex mythological canvas upon which stories like Journey to the West would later be told. This innovation was followed by a tune-up for the governing bureaucracy during the Song Dynasty, as well as a bunch of cool inventions like movable type printing and paper money. And speaking of money, trade relations with the outside world picked up substantially after the turn of the millennium, especially in the Yuan period. This was actually a Mongolian dynasty who conquered China in the 1200s, and in the following century was famously recounted by Marco Polo as prosperous beyond imagination. The rapid expansion of the Mongol Empire revived the ancient Silk Road, spreading trade and culture across Central Asia and over to the Muslim world.
So basically, China was out here balling. Like, the rest of the world was struggling, and China was like, not us, not us. We are organized. We have our shit together.
Now, unlike China's continuity and evolution, the Abrahamic religion of Islam was remarkably new, and a distinct civilization had formed around it impressively quickly. In just a few centuries after holy revelations in early 600s Arabia set things in motion, the Muslim faith filled the map from the Mediterranean all the way to the Indus Valley, unifying diverse people and disparate states in one pervading culture. And from the mid-700s onward, that culture was in its golden age, where faith found an eager ally in scholarship. Muslims living among the vibrantly multi-ethnic cities of Al-Andalus or along the ancient valleys of the Nile were brushing shoulders with some of the sharpest minds of the day, but nothing compared to the magnificent Abbasid capital of Baghdad, where the legendary House of Wisdom catered to seemingly every art and field of study, from theology to science and math to music. Fortunately for the Golden Age and everyone who prospered from it, there's a real resilience in a culture of many countries, as the Muslim world endured civil wars, caliphates supplanting each other, invaders in the Levant and Iberia, and even the Mongol sack of Baghdad in 1258, but remained prosperous, cosmopolitan, and studious for centuries to come. From its vantage across the Mediterranean, Christendom had much to envy in the Islamic world, but a few enterprising states did their best to narrow that gap. So, I now cordially welcome you to the Venice portion of the video. If you didn't see this coming, then hi, welcome to the channel.
We know all about your love affair with Venice, Blue. We got it.
Hope you like domes. See, the Republic of Venice was a small but powerful state that grew fabulously wealthy because of their rare eagerness to do business with Muslim colleagues. All they had to do was shake some hands, sell some goods, and then figure out what to build with their mountains of cash. And their government's enviable consistency ensured they stayed a fixture of Mediterranean trade for a millennium. But at home, Venice kept firmly to their familiar Christian culture, unlike their southern neighbors in Sicily. From the 1000s, Norman newcomers built a gorgeous society from the mix of Lombard, Latin, Muslim, and Byzantine people in the south of Italy. The talents of this diverse cast are still seen in Sicilian architecture, which celebrates the kinship of Islam, Catholicism, and Byzantine Christianity. Fittingly, Sicily and Venice both could trace their roots to the still very much alive Eastern Roman Empire, ruled from the incomparable city of Constantinople since the 300s AD. This part of the empire, called Byzantine by later historians, survived all the turmoil that sank the West and continued the language, literature, and towering grandeur of the classical world, but here under the banner of Christianity. Although most Europeans sneered at Byzantine decadence, I maintain they were just jealous, nearby Slavic groups gladly threw in with the Eastern Church. Constantinople can claim credit for a few key conversions to Christianity, winning over the Bulgarians in 864, the Serbians in 870, and the vast Kievan Rus in 988, bringing much of Eastern Europe into its religious, cultural, and political orbit. To Catholicism's credit, they had converted the incoming Franks and Germanic tribes several centuries back, and soon after got the Isles, then Poland later on in 966, and finally the fearsome Scandinavian Vikings. But whereas Byzantine Christianity had an empire at its back, this was a lot for the Catholic Pope in Rome to organize from a city that had become very small after the Western Empire fell. So they got clever, creating an international administration of clergy and monasteries that let the church maintain religious authority across distant lands and kingdoms it didn't directly control. The other swerve was that if Rome no longer had an empire of its own, why not just order one? At the turn of the 9th century, such was the thinking of Pope Leo III, who recognized that the Frankish barbarians who arrived 4 centuries earlier had actually become quite competent rulers, with a dominion recently expanded from Gaul now to Germania and into Italy itself. And these Frankish kings of the Carolingian dynasty had long been allies of the Pope, so in 800 he crowned Charlemagne, the biggest of Charleses, as Emperor of the Romans. This sets up a fascinating dynamic where the religious authority in Rome presides over a vast network of monasteries across Europe, while also having an entire political state at its service. And this also benefits the emperor, because the notion of Christendom as a cultural tie that binds all Christian people and states is exceptionally fertile ground for an empire. Leo and Charlemagne considered this a continuation of the Roman Empire, which, though cute, is fully untrue, so while historical habits force us to call this the Holy Roman Empire, consider this instead as Imperial Catholicism, a dominion spanning the state itself and the religious authority of the Pope.
I think, that term more fully explains what it means. Yeah, that absolutely makes sense. Okay.
Unfortunately for the Carolingians, the kingdom split between 3 sons in 840, sending France and Germany on separate trajectories, but the idea of Christendom's empire was still so potent that Pope John crowned King Otto of Germany as Roman Emperor in 962, creating a state that would endure, evolve, and ultimately rule over Central Europe for nearly a millennium. This was not without friction, as popes and emperors spent centuries jockeying for authority over the other, often with bloody outcomes, and political cohesion did not come easily. Various bouts of royal weakness benefited the many small states of Germany and northern Italy, making the empire fertile ground for an array of functionally independent city-states. Elsewhere in the Christian north, centralized states were tricky to build, as Charlemagne's Carolingian dynasty lost hold of France in the face of internal strife and constant Viking raids, even resorting to giving one Viking lord a duchy in Normandy in the hope he'd stop making a mess. After ascending,
he said, yo, chill, bro, here, damn, take it, shut up.
After ascending to the French throne in 987, it took 2 centuries for the Capetian dynasty to meaningfully control anything beyond Paris, so France didn't look like France until nearly 1600.
Really?
As in Germany, local lords across the kingdom tended to do as they pleased, but another confounding factor for France was, of course, England. The Isles started their medieval era with migrations and missionaries from the mainland and had consolidated into 24 or so states by the 800s, just in time for the Vikings to arrive. This was bad news for the gorgeous and richly ornamented monasteries of Britain and Ireland, and 2 centuries of Anglo-Viking wars made kingdoms unstable, but it culminated in England's conquest by William of Normandy. This in turn kicked off a flurry of castle building, innovations towards parliamentary government, steady progress in conquering the rest of the Isles, 4 long centuries of slap fighting with France, and the endlessly dramatic War of the Roses. British history would become something of the model for how we see the medieval period, thanks in no small part to the historical plays of Shakespeare, who characterized states by the conflicts they faced and the great kings who fought them. In Northwest Europe, this wasn't strictly wrong, but it gives a very narrow perspective. Glory for kings and toil for the rest. And as we zoom back out, we see the Middle Ages were brutal. Wars were frequent, states were fragile, life was harsh, but
niggas was dying.
But so too is every square inch of planet Earth since the moment Bruce the single-celled life form first sprung into existence. That all can be true right alongside the endless beauties of human civilization. We accept the Roman world as a disease-ridden murder fest and a staggering accomplishment of culture. And once we see the medieval worlds the same way, we unlock a tremendous wealth of history to explore. Because along with all that conflict came 4 waves of massive cultural advancement. First the Islamic Golden Age, then the Carolingian and Ottonian Renaissances following the start of their empires, and then the 12th century Renaissance, which brought on vernacular literature, Gothic architecture, early rediscoveries of classical culture, and the creation of European universities. The medieval world began at the dawn of Muslim, Orthodox, and Catholic cultures and transformed them into international civilizations, developing beautiful traditions of artistry and literature that still uphold European and Mediterranean societies today. All that to say, the Dark Ages is a myth perpetuated by Big Renaissance to sell you more paintings.
Not Big Renaissance.
Thank you so much for watching.
I really enjoyed this video. I really think like it's a super necessary perspective, because I really do think that people forget how Eurocentric a lot of the history that we study is. In America, we talk about European history and American history, and that's basically it until you get to university. And then if you know, like once you get to college, you then sometimes have the opportunity, I was gonna say you have the opportunity to spec into other histories like it's a fucking video game. I guess we can consider life and education a video game, right? Specifically in America, I don't know about like other countries. I don't know, you know, how much like y'all center your own history as opposed to like other history. In America, we really focus on like America first, right? Like America! And then like Western Europe and really mainly just England. Like you learn about like the French Revolution a bit, but you learn almost nothing about Spain or Portugal or even Germany until like you get to World War II. And then like we kind of talk about other countries, but not really. But like, to be honest, and I don't know if this is still true, but like when I was a kid, like they were still teaching us that Christopher Columbus discovered America. Like you don't even talk about Leif Erikson until you're in like middle school. So suffice it to say that the learning of history, specifically in America, is very haphazard, very much incomplete. I really enjoyed this video. I wish we could have talked more about the impact of Islam and the Muslims specifically, but obviously, like, you know, he's trying to keep it cute and concise. You know, it's an 11-minute video. There's only so much he can get into. So I do hope that like in later videos, he kind of talks a little bit more about that, because it's truly fascinating. Like, especially so much of like Spanish culture, it is derived, you know, from when the Muslims were there, you know, when the Abbasid Caliphate, you know, like had people there. So I think it's really interesting. I think it's really fascinating. I had a great time watching this video. I hope you guys did as well. Don't forget to leave your reaction requests and recommendations down in the comments below. And other than that, peace out, Hope Biscuits. It's Skittin' Lit.